Hello everyone, and thank you for coming back to yet another episode of The Glowing Paradigm. I am your host, Peter, aka LPD8 Dubuque, and this week there's a couple of things I just want to cover real quick, and then we'll get right into the meat of everything. So, first things first, I want to apologize to all my listeners and everyone who's been following this show. As you could probably tell, still from my voice, I am kind of coming out of yet another illness that really took my voice again and also plugged up my sinuses to the point where I just couldn't really breathe out of my nose anymore. So I didn't want to subject any of my listeners to a nasally, voice cracking montage monologue thing that I just know would either make you laugh your butt off or you will just turn off the episode right there and then. So, as unfortunate as it was, I do have to apologize again for having to postpone an episode to this coming week now. Main reason is because it infuriates me when I do so, because I like what I do. I like creating content for all my listeners. I know I don't always get a whole lot of responses from my listeners, but you guys do come back and listen every time. So I do highly appreciate all of your guys' support. I do appreciate all the feedback you guys have said on Reddit and other various platforms, wishing me well and wishing me to come back and make sure to make more content for you guys. So here I am again making more content. The other thing I also want to point out, and this is one of those things that just kind of to be a good example of what it is to be a human being. So unfortunately, with the timing of me getting my new job and how bills kind of lined up, especially in the month of February being such a short month, things kind of compounded on themselves. So currently I am without phone service. And the main reason why I can post on Facebook and other platforms was because luckily there is a free Wi-Fi outlet at my work that I can actually utilize when I need to do so. And I did, to let you guys know what's been going on. And I just want to apologize once more about all that. So anyways, just to put things in perspective, yes, things have happened where I'm kind of limited on my resources. However, it's just all a matter of waiting for paychecks to start flowing through. Things I have found out is that my paychecks fall on the alternating week of my husband's paycheck. So in essence, we'll be getting paid every week, which works really, really well for us. So in due time, very shortly, everything will get back to the way it was. And then I'll actually let you guys know what will be coming from that as well. But anyways, let's get back to the topic at hand here. About this episode, basically. So a couple days or probably a couple weeks now since this actually happened, there was I wouldn't say an incident, but there was a level of altercation that has happened in the community. And it's something that I felt like, instead of kind of just doing this whole little, oh, let's do a lesson about how to practice and stuff, I kind of just want to sit down and chat about this. Because this, to me, it shows a very good example of not only what we should do, but what we should also not do when it actually comes to communal contentions. So what this episode is going to be about is what I like to call the Glover's Kantian choice. Now, why is there contention going on in the community? Well, there was a very infamous post at this point that got posted by a certain individual that I'm not going to name names. And I'm not going to delve into the details of the whole altercation that has happened, because at this point it's just now irrelevant and it's already happened and there's nothing I can really do about it at this point, right? So what this post was talking about was somebody who wanted to understand what he needed to know to get into the competitive scene. And he made a comment on this post saying that he wanted to, quote unquote, dominate the competition. Okay, so that was the post. It was the underlying thing that people are looking at is the phrase of him saying wanting to dominate the scene. I will tell you from my own personal experience, when I hear somebody say something like that in terms of a competitive capacity, I understand where he's coming from. He wants to really make a huge mark. He really wants to make this huge impact. That's his goal, which is totally fine in my opinion. Somebody who has an ambitious goal like that is okay in my book, because it shows that they have the drive to do so. Well, the responses were very mixed amongst a lot of people, and I can understand where a lot of people come from when it comes to this way of talking about when it comes to the competitive scene. Even from my own experience, especially in the Magic community, I've seen it also in the Yu-Gi-Oh community, I've seen it in plenty of other gaming communities, how some people really react generally negative towards a remark like that. And, I totally understand where people get the whole idea of the ego getting too big thing, or that's how it came off. Whatever the case may be, what happened has happened. So, why is this such a huge issue? Well, to me, I feel like just reading through the comments, which if you haven't seen this post has like over 400 comments all over it. So, if you want to have a very long and detailed read about this whole situation, just try to look up that post and you pretty much know where to go from there. There has actually been other posts that people have talked about this post. Again, I'm not making any names because at this point it is irrelevant what people have said. That's not what the lesson is for today. So the issues that I saw were happening were, misinterpretations of certain phrases, or people having an emotional response to the initial post. And I just felt like there's been some bad stigmatizations coming out of this from what I was reading. Now, I will certainly say this. I can totally understand how some people are when it comes to people being competitive and, getting a little too gung-ho, lack of a better phrase, about competition. And I can totally understand. I've been in that kind of position myself before. Granted, I never really let competition get too far into my head. However, I've seen it time and time again in various different areas in competition where people just get a little too, as I would like to say, passionate about the competition. And to me, there's nothing wrong with being passionate about the competitions, whatever your competition may be. Now, granted, I will tell you that gloving, once again, is not my competitive outlet, it is my expressive outlet. My competitive outlet is Magic the Gathering. All my listeners know this by now, and I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing me say this like a broken record, but it is what it is for me. And I know a lot of people are going to tell me that, your words shouldn't have any accreditation if you don't actively put yourself in the competitive scene of gloving as it is. As that may be, I am a person who likes to observe, and I do watch the competition scene as it unfolds. There's nothing telling me as a casual glover, as I put myself in that position, that says, oh, well, if I never intend on doing any competitions to be very competitive with it, then what's the point of really watching the competitions? Well, there's various reasons. There's inspirations, just ideas where people come up with, seeing where the trends are going, what people are liking. That's just things that I find interesting. Okay. And I feel like a lot of the casual community when it comes to gloving kind of puts this bad stigmatization on competitive gloving. And whether it be for whatever reason they want, whether it be for, gloving is supposed to be for expression or what have you, what the usual default form letter response that the casual community likes to put out. I've seen this again time and time in various different platforms. There's always, when it comes to the casual and the competitive scenes, they will always clash. I have never really seen the two sides of a scene, whether it be gloving or Magic or, Smash Brothers, whatever the case may be, even dancing. I never really seen casual and competitive really mesh. And it's just because they're just two different worlds, two different mentalities that happen. And, it takes two opposing forces to cause friction. And that's what basically happened. Okay, so I totally understand when people first read it, their emotional responses are usually the first thing that always happens, because that's how we are as humans. Our emotions tend to run certain things. It's only when we let logic and reason take over to quell our emotions is when we actually seek enlightenment, basically. Or not as much enlightenment, but more just understanding. Okay, so that's one of the big issues is that I've been seeing a lot, is that there's always a level of misinterpretation, emotional responses, and just bad stigmatizations about things. Especially when it comes to competitions. I don't understand why there's been such a pushback on competition, especially when it comes to gloving, because everything needs to have a competitive outlet if it's going to thrive. It's as much as people want to disagree, competition is a driving force, is what pushes people to try things out. As much as everyone wants to sit there and kind of debacle over what is what, there is one underlining truth when it comes to competitions, and it is the driving force behind the scene. The casual market, or the casual scene, basically is the sustaining force, as I always put it. It's the people who have such a strong passion for whatever it is that keep it alive. So basically competition is just the driving force, as casual scenes are just the sustaining force, is what allows it to grow and work on itself and just maintain itself. So please understand, when it comes to the competitive scene and the casual scene, you're just always going to see that kind of clash. And in my opinion, you just don't want to add fuel to that fire. So what are things that we can actually do about that kind of issue? Well, there's a lot of things. The first thing I actually want to quote, which is, if you look at the title, A Glover's Kantian Choice, the term Kantian comes from a wonderful writer back in the day, and I mean way back in the day, we're talking like revolutionary time level, by a person named Immanuel Kant. What Immanuel Kant likes to write about is, especially when it came to like stories and creative writing, but he also did some philosophical stuff, and there was this thing that he did called categorical imperatives. Okay, and this is one of the things I want to actually examine to kind of help us guide us in a right direction in terms of how we go about conducting ourselves in the community. And I'm not saying that this is a set in stone thing. This is me just giving people ideas to think about and maybe apply. If you feel like it would work for you, then go ahead. If you don't, if you think I'm crazy and I'm just full of it, then that's your thing. And that's something I've always expected from my listeners, is to make up your own damn mind. Okay, it's either you believe me or you don't. It is not my choice to make you believe or not. It is your choice. Okay, so I'm never going to tell people that my opinion's divine law and you have to listen to it. It is more of an excerpt of perception that I wish people would just observe. Okay, so this category imperative that I'm going to be speaking about it's going to sound very cryptic at first, because that's how Immanuel Kant wrote. Excuse me. That's how he wrote. And it confuses a lot of people, so I'll actually help you break it down. So here's the categorical imperative that I want you to think about. We should only exercise in our maxim that if we can at the same time will into a universal law. Okay, what the hell does that mean? Well, it's if you think about it, it's actually kind of simple. You should only do things that you're okay with other people doing all the time. So you wouldn't want to throw cake at the wall if you didn't want to live in a world where everyone was so violent to dessert. Okay? A great example that I feel a lot of people might use is, you wouldn't want to forget your gloves at home when you go to a venue if you didn't want to live in a world where every glover forgot their gloves. Right? That's just one of those big things that everyone likes to talk about, is when people ask for gloves. That's my best example to tie it into gloving for you guys. Okay, so that's the imperative that I want you guys to think about is, if you are not going to do it because you're not okay with everyone else doing it all the time, that's something that you need to really think about. Okay, so the whole let's just bash on the person really, really fast and jump on the bandwagon, that's something that I would never do, because I don't want to live in a world or be in a community where everyone does that all the time. Okay, and I know I'm kind of painting a target on my back talking about this stuff, but this is just a kind of a lesson to sit there and think about communal contentions that happen. Do you really want to get involved with something that might blow out of proportion really, really fast, which tends to happen on the internet? Or are you going to be like me, who's just going to observe and learn the lessons that happen from other people? So one idea that I always think about when it comes to, an argument like this is, how Socrates took up arguments. Now, if you guys don't know who Socrates is, which would be absolutely insane at this point, Socrates was a philosopher back in the ancient Greek times, in the Roman times, especially when the church was around, really before Aristotle. And instead of people asking him questions on philosophy, he would actually go around and ask, religious leaders, other philosophers, questions, and then he would argue against them to bring out an argument. He would always take basically the devil's advocate to work on argument. And he would always, they would counter with their philosophies, and it would be this back and forth, which at first people are going to sit there and think, well, he's just trying to pick a fight, which is not necessarily true. What he's actually doing is broadening your mental horizons for understanding. Helping you look at a different point of view, look outside the box, whatever choice phrase you want to put in this situation. That's what Socrates was all about. It was expanding understanding by arguing. Okay? So that's something that I'm always okay with. I always like the phrase "for the sake of argument" because it's, trying to help other people just understand, or at least be aware of a different perspective of things. So if that's what you're going to try to do, try to keep it at least as civil as possible. But, try to argue just for the sake of argument, just so, you're covering all the bases and trying to help people look at different perspectives so they can also understand. Which also ties into the whole having a questioning nature when it comes to things like that. I'm very, very much a person who likes to question a lot of things, and it's just to understand. If I don't understand something, I'm going to ask. And I will even say to all my listeners right now, and I've said this a million times in my life, the dumbest question out there is the question never asked. Okay? As much as everyone wants to say that, there's questions out there that you can clearly tell are just stupid questions for asking, like, if a metal is glowing red, is it hot? Yeah, okay, I can understand that. However, when it comes to understanding, the dumbest question is the one never asked. Okay? So gaining understanding is probably one of the biggest things I always try to implore on people, because there's so many different points of view in reality now, and especially in the age of information that we all live in. People are downloading different perspectives in seconds rather than years, like it was before the internet showed up. Okay, so things can get just really muddled really fast, and I totally understand, when it comes to things like that. But one of the major things I always want to do to help prevent these things, which is the next point of this, is, speak clearly on your intentions. Now, I can totally understand where people didn't really understand his intentions when this person said that he wanted to dominate the scene. Maybe he could have cleared it up and clarified on it a lot better by talking about how he just wanted to be really, really good and really wanted to push up on the ladder. And there's nothing wrong with that. A guy, somebody who's a Glover who has goals is fantastic. It's one of those things that I always sit there and ask myself, what is the goal when it comes to gloving for me? Which everyone should know is to express myself and enjoy myself. And that's my goal. If somebody finds the competitive outlet of gloving for them to be what they want, and the goal is to be what the competitive outlet is. If it's just to be one of the greatest, which is fine, which I can even tell you from my own experience, people who are considered the best pro players in the scene of Magic the Gathering don't have a lot of wins under their belt from the Pro Tours, which they changed the name. I'm not going to get into that deal, but I'm going to still refer to it as the Pro Tour. There's people who are in the Hall of Fame that only has like one title under their belt type deal, but showing their results through throughout the years of consistently making good standings, even making multiple top 8s, things of that nature, they're still considered a really good player. Which to me would be the same way if you look at gloving, for example. Now I can totally understand where everyone comes from, where, well, there's not a whole lot of competitions and a lot of it involves travel and a lot of da-da-da. I totally understand that. I will even admit that the competition scene of gloving is very, very small, as most competition scenes are. It's actually a very small minority of the entire customer base or hobby base or whatever the case may be when it comes to gloving. I'm used to saying player base, but that doesn't apply to gloving. So thinking of it that way, it's really hard for people to understand that, they think accreditation comes when you have wins, when it's actually not the point. It's actually your statistics showing how well you're putting up results, So if you're somebody, let's say in the gloving competition, who consistently makes it into the top 8 and always make it up to the top 4, that's really, really good. Just making top 8 is probably really, really good as it is, considering that you're going up against 31 other competitors. So, racking up top 8s under your belt is a good way to gain some reputation and accreditation in terms of the competitive capacity. So, kind of using that as your clear intentions of just saying, I just want to be really, really good and put up really good results. That doesn't, to me at least, it doesn't come off as cocky or arrogant or egotistical. To me, it's clearly defining that his goal is to work really, really hard, and he's showing that he has the commitment to put into it. So, speaking clearly on your intentions is one way to help. Asking clarification questions is another way to help. Okay, I've had people always ask me what's the difference between my show and the Gloving Nucleus, and it's besides the obvious platform setup, which mine is just purely audio, as his is purely streaming onto Facebook. There's other differences. I'm usually by myself just doing this. I want to change that, but I'll get that a little bit later. He always has interviews. He always has well-known glovers on his show. He's always doing interviews and they're talking about stuff, which I always find fantastic because it gives such a huge scope on the stars of the scene to actually allow star building to happen. Okay, and star building is always good for any scene, no matter what anyone says. Star building is good. Now, I can understand if there are certain villains that come out of it. That's just the natural way, especially when it comes to a lot of the celebrity scenes in a lot of different hobbies, whatnot. I can certainly tell you, at least in the Magic community, there's always Alex Bersini, which, if you guys don't know, he's very famous in the Magic community for cheating. And if I remember correctly, he's been recently banned for life, and it's more on the side of not as much as him cheating, is that his reputation has destroyed any confidence that any player has going up against him in any tournament setting. And I can totally understand why, because why would any player want to sit there and have to be super extra vigilant while also having like 3 other judges sitting around there just to make sure that this one person does not anything to cheat, So, star building is good. Villains do come out of it, but some people would tell you that villains are good just to help you determine what's good and what's bad. So, the last thing to help prevent it is actually just having a discussion and not just turning it into a shouting match between each other. Which, reading from those comments, a lot of people were very emotionally reactive to the whole thing, and it resulted in what appeared that the person left and was leaving the scene because of the amount of hostility that was happening. But of course, he kind of came back and realized that how he came off wasn't the best. So somebody willing to admit that they were wrong is always good. I will always gladly concede when somebody actually proves me wrong, because it allows me to learn. And that's one of the big things for me, is to, instead of being gung-ho on an argument, is that if you've been provided with enough evidence to prove that your argument is invalid, you should take that and learn from it instead. instead of having the emotional response of defeat, you know what I mean? So, my final thoughts on this whole thing is when it comes to situations like this, or when you see posts with these kind of phrases that happen that kind of, I'm not going to use the word trigger because I don't like it, when it kind of sends you on a tilt, okay, you got to really take a quick step back and think about it, and especially when it comes to Immanuel Kant's categorical imperatives. Is that something you really want to do, or if this is something that you're going to do, you gotta ask yourself, are you okay with everyone else doing this all the time? Are you okay with people actually just attacking somebody because they wanted to do something in the competitive scene? If that's not what you feel comfortable with everyone else doing, then maybe that's something you shouldn't be doing. I will always just simply try to observe when situations like this happens, because there's always a lesson to learn from this. As you can well tell, the person actually came out and said, you know what, I made a mistake. I need to really understand where to begin with everything, and instead of jumping the gun. Okay, so it's one of those lessons that I feel like everyone should just needs to learn. All right. So if you ever find yourself in this situation, people tend to tilt. Don't try to fight back with their emotional reactions with your own emotional reactions, because all that is going to just end up is people fighting. Posts being thrown all over the place and slamming each other, and it just does not look good on the community. Okay, and especially since this was somebody who was just a brand newcomer. Well, at least that's what my impression was, is that this person was a newcomer and felt just the full wrath of what the community tends to do. Now, I'm not saying that the community is bad. The community is what it is the gloving community. Okay, it has it's a mixing pot of various different cultures and lifestyles and ways of life that, when they're mixing together, sometimes you have reactions that just kind of causes other chain reactions. So, I totally understand where other people come from, where it felt like it came off. Totally understandable. So, one of those things is where if you're reading it and you're just like, this might come off wrong, you might want to just reiterate what you're trying to say. Again, speak clearly on your intentions. And when it comes to having a discussion and just not an argument, is to try to maintain the level of just doing it for understanding rather than defending your point to the bitter end. Granted, the gloving community is not my opinion is divine law scenario that I've seen in other communities. However, there are a couple of people that do that. And I'm one person who would say that my opinion is not divine law, and you can tell me all day that I'm full of crap. Okay, I really don't care, because my point of view is my point of view, and I'm always willing for somebody to at least show me a different point of view to at least understand. So that's pretty much all I have to say for this episode. This whole situation that happened really, really escalated. I felt like it kind of went out of control really fast, which tends to happen on the internet. It's the internet. That's how people are on the internet nowadays. So I do feel like, especially when it comes to online interactions, you definitely want to just work on being very clear on your intentions. You definitely want to make sure that if you are in a discussion with somebody and you're not understanding certain things, to ask clarification questions, because if you immediately assume something that they're saying and that's not what they're trying to say, then you're going to end up in a situation where anything they say to try to help you understand, you're going to immediately dismiss, because that is your emotional reaction to it now. Okay. So, yeah, that's pretty much all for my episode. My intention on this was just to help bring a level of understanding as a lesson, to, instead of acting like how some people do, is actually take a step back and really think about what you're going to do, and sit there and think, am I okay with the gloving community doing this all the time? And if you're not okay with that, then what you're doing is something you shouldn't be doing. Okay, now I will leave that with you guys. believe me or not. You can tell me to shove it up my butt if you want. You can tell me that what an interesting way to take on the community's contentions the way it has. Whatever the case may be, please let me know. I would love to hear what you guys have to say on this matter. Now, I'm not asking you to talk to me about the specific details of what certain people have said. I would like you to discuss with me on just the whole situation as a whole, okay? And instead of just nitpicking every little thing, just kind of look at what the overall lesson that was happening there, and we'll have a discussion about it, okay? So you can definitely hit me up at my email, which is muttonchopguy@gmail.com, and you can also find me on Facebook, which is aptly named The Gloving Paradigm. And you can also hit me up on my Discord server. The link will also be in this episode description, so be sure to click on that and say hello. I am more than willing to talk to everyone there. Now, granted, I'm still kind of having issues with the phone service. However, that will be done way before the next episode even comes out. So don't even worry about that. I'm sure by the time that this episode even posts, I will have my phone service back on as it is. So don't even fret. Next week, though, I do want to let you guys know that I will be discussing a couple of things that I would like to implore on to all of you. So please be sure to tune in next week. But that is all for my episode for today. I am your host, Peter, aka LPD8 Dubuque, and I'll see you guys all next week.